Let's move on to Kamala Harris, who has done 6 interviews since being named the presidential nominee after President Joe Biden stepped down. 3 of them have been with friendly radio hosts. I think we all remember how some of those radio interviews have been handled in the past, but she did sit down yesterday for a fairly long back and forth. In addition to the NABJ interview, she did one other interview. This one
with the local Philadelphia TV reporter.
Yeah. So this one was really the longest exchange I think that she's had, at least live, since being named the presidential nominee. And this was at the National Association of Black Journalists in conversation at an NABJ event. We all remember how Donald Trump's NABJ sit-down went.
Perfect.
Yeah, it was perfect. It was a perfect phone call. So let's take a listen to this answer that Kamala Harris gave on the economy yesterday.
We had then a lot of work to do to clean up a mess. As of today, we have created over 16 million new jobs, over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs. We have the lowest Black unemployment rate in generations. We have invested in small businesses, and they're to the benefit of many people, but including Black small businesses, some of the highest rate of creation of new Black small businesses in years. We have done the work of capping the cost of prescription medication for our seniors for issues like insulin. And again, I'm speaking to the Black journalists who care about all people, but in particular, I'll talk about the impact on Black people, where we know Black folks are 60% more likely to be diagnosed with diabetes. And we have now finally capped the cost of insulin for our seniors at $35 a month, capped the cost of prescription medication for our seniors at $2,000 a year, because we, unlike the former president who promised to do it, we finally have allowed Medicare to negotiate drug prices against the big pharmaceutical companies. And these are just some of the accomplishments. Is the price of groceries still too high? Yes. Do we have more work to do? Yes.
All right, do we have more work to do? That's one way to kind of handle questions about how you're part of an administration in which people still see grocery prices as being too high compared to the administration that came immediately before it. Now, Kamala Harris also was asked actually about what she makes of trends that are showing up in polls among Black men, in particular being sort of pulled towards Donald Trump in some numbers that just Republicans aren't used to seeing, Democrats aren't used to seeing. It's hardly going to be a landslide for Donald Trump among Black men, but the patterns are interesting enough to warrant further speculation, of course. So here's how Kamala Harris responded to that.
You have engaged Black men and centered them in your economic opportunity tour. Mm-hmm. But polling shows that some Black men, particularly young Black men, are considering voting for Donald Trump, and they see him as better for the economy. What is your message to young Black male voters who feel left out of this economy, and how can your economic policies materially change their lives?
So I appreciate the spirit of the question, but I'll tell you, I've often been asked this question in a way that I've had to respond by first saying that I think it's very important to not operate from the assumption that Black men are in anybody's pocket. Black men are like any other voting group. You gotta earn their vote. So I'm working to earn the vote, not assuming I'm going to have it because I am Black, but because the policies and the perspectives I have understands what we must do to recognize the needs of all communities. And I intend to be a president for all people.
So I have to say, I actually thought that was a pretty good answer, partially because of what Nina Turner said. Nina Turner during the DNC told the Free Press that the Democratic Party kind of emasculates Black men from Nina's perspective, at least. I think there's probably some truth to that. And Kamala Harris saying, I'm not taking anything for granted, was probably the best way that she could respond to that. I don't know. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I think that's right. And on the previous clip, I would love to have a politics where people are constantly competing for who can take on Big Pharma more.
Yes, yeah, that'd be great.
Like Biden pushing through with the Inflation Reduction Act, Medicare negotiation after Democrats ran on it in 2006. And then when they took over the White House in 2009 and had both houses of Congress, they traded it to pharma in exchange for pharma support for Obamacare. Right. And then they were like, it's just a one-year deal. After this, then we're back at it. And Then they claimed they were going to do it, for the next 10 years. But then they finally did it. And it took them 15 years, but it's a real credit to the advocates who were pushing for it, to seniors who have been organizing around that issue, because you're up against one of the most powerful lobbies in Washington. Like, I think they have something like 5 or 6 lobbyists for every single member of Congress. The amount of money that they have to spend because of federal policy is ungodly. And they did beat them. And the Medicare negotiations, the insulin cap is a literal lifesaver, and the negotiations estimated to save something like $7-8 billion for both Medicare and seniors, and also pushes down prices for everybody. But it also is a huge kind of toe in the door. So to have them, I would love to see then Trump come back and be like, no, I'm actually going to be tougher on Big Pharma when I come in.
He never does. That's, as you were outlining that, I find it, we've talked about this before, but it is so interesting that, and Matt Siller's actually gone back and listened to Trump's speeches from 2016 and compared them to Trump's speeches from 2024. He was constantly railing, not just against like elites, but against other corporate elites. And I say other because he would say, I know the system, and like these guys are corrupt and they're fleecing you. And he's never really gone in on that with Big Pharma at all, despite the mounting opposition to pharma, ag, health industry from conservatives. Tucker has platformed these conversations on his show that have really resonated with a lot of people on the right. You just don't hear it from Trump at all, despite the fact that it is really a massive opening. And if there was anything that could shake the Republican Party out of its absurd blind spot and inability to come to the table on healthcare, which is repeatedly in polls shows up as one of the most important issues for voters, it would have been Donald Trump coming in and just taking a bulldozer to corporate allegiances in the Republican Party, and it hasn't happened.
Yeah, and they already have old people, so lock those old people in. He did do an executive order that had a voluntary price cap on insulin at $35 for seniors, which did help some seniors. And I've seen Trump try to take credit for what happened later in the Inflation Reduction Act. But a voluntary executive order that applies just to seniors is totally different than a law that applies for everybody across the country. I like to see Trump like upset by the fact that he got outflanked on that, because then hopefully it shows Republicans like this is a winning political issue.
Yeah, clearly.
Like, make people's lives better on a daily basis, and then brag about it. Like that would be a cool politics.
Yeah, well, there's really interesting studies of happiness in indigenous communities that have been basically isolated from technology. So people living like they did thousands of years ago. And one of the biggest sources, they have pretty high levels of happiness. Their sources of stress or things that contribute to unhappiness are community and health. So it's kind of interesting, right, that you can have all of your needs met. You can feel content across the board. But if health is a concern for you, it will drag down your levels of happiness. It's one of the things, in addition to community, that can really drag down a person's level of happiness. And Republicans just have zero idea what to do about it and zero interest in talking about it. So, Ren, let's pivot to what Kamala Harris said when she was entertaining questions on Israel and Palestine. This was she was asked about the ceasefire and ongoing negotiations. Let's just roll the clip.
But Madam Vice President, just to follow up really quickly, is there a specific policy change that you, as President of the United States, would say you would do that would help this along? Because you've gotten a lot of credit for emphasizing the humanity of Palestinians. But what I often hear from folks is that there's no policy change that either you or the President Biden have gone and said they would do. Is there a specific policy change as president that you would do in our helping of Israel?
We need to get this deal done, and we need to get it done immediately, and that is my position, and that is my policy. We need to get this deal done.
But in the way that we send weapons, in the way that we interact as their ally, are there specific policy changes?
Well, Eugene, for example, one of the things that we have done that I am entirely supportive of is the pause that we've put on the 2,000-pound bombs. And so there is some leverage that we have had and used. But ultimately, the thing that is going to unlock everything else in that region is getting this deal done. And I'm not going to disclose private conversations, but I will tell you, I've had direct conversations with the Prime Minister, with the President of Israel, with Egyptian leaders, and with our allies. And I think we've made ourselves very clear this deal needs to get done in the best interest of everyone in the region, including getting those hostages out who, I mean, we saw the latest example of what happened with the six most recently, one of whom was an American citizen.
But what do you say to those that say that's not enough, that stopping the 2,000-pound bombs the one time wasn't enough, that this administration, your possible administration, has to do more?
Well, we are doing the work of putting the pressure on all parties involved to get the deal done.
Ren, that one kind of reminds me of Trump saying that he has concepts of a plan.
Yeah.
What did you make of Kamala Harris's response?
You make yourself either look like a liar or like you're just terribly weak and incompetent.
A caricature of a politician.
Or I mean, as a statesperson, like, because either you're lying and you completely support this war effort and are sending the weapons so that the weapons can continue to be used, which is the most logical reason you would send weapons to somebody, or you're just such an incompetent moron that you run the most powerful empire in the history of the world, and you can't figure out how to get a country of like 7 million, 8 million people to do what you want it to do, despite the fact that you fund and arm that country.
Right.
Like if you can't figure out how to do that, how can you do anything difficult in when it comes to world affairs? So it either makes you look like you are completely weak and just getting steamrolled by Israel, or that you're completely comfortable and complicit in what is being done. Eugene just kept pushing, like, is there anything you would do differently than the Biden administration? Anything.
Right.
And to his credit, she tried to use the 2,000-pound bomb point. He pointed out that that was one time and limited. So they're not even doing that anymore. They just dropped 3 of those a week ago and shredded dozens of children. Those exact 2,000-pound bombs that she's over here trying to claim, and that claim would have hung out there as unchallenged if Eugene hadn't contested it. The support for Biden's policy is in the 20s. She also is struggling to find ways to distance herself from Biden.
Yes. From the Biden-Harris administration. Yeah.
And here's a policy that's not working and is in the 20s, and you won't divorce yourself from it. Therefore, you're either a complete moron or you actually think it is working. You like what's being done. There's really those are the only 2 options.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's a failure by their own terms.
Right.
It's either a failure by their own terms, or their own terms are
they're lying about what
accepting
they
the
are,
status
and they're actually
quo.
fine with what it is.
The status quo, yeah, exactly. No, I mean, again, like, we heard all DNC week about how close we were to a ceasefire, and I think they like having the ceasefire on the table politically because it makes them look like they're working for something better. And I'm not trying to impugn anyone's motives, but I do think politically during the presidential election, having the ceasefire on the table allows Kamala Harris to get away with these sort of laughable, two-sided statements where in one breath she will say something that isolated the sentiment is totally pro-Israel, and then the next breath she will just say a sentence that isolated the sentiment is totally pro-Palestine. It's just a complete farce. It's like a political farce. It's almost like satire. And I think having the deal in negotiation is sort of a tool for them to be able to do that.
Remember when you had Biden licking the ice cream and being like, oh yeah, we're getting a deal by Friday.
Yeah, watch this drive, basically.
Yeah. Like, that was, I forget what month that was, many, many months ago. Jake Sullivan told Netanyahu in this cabinet back in November, like, this has to be over by the end of the year. That was 2023.
Right. We're closer every day, Ryan.
Yeah.
Closer every day. Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.